Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin sentenced to a total of 22 and a half years behind bars for the murder of George Floyd. Hi again and welcome. This is Fl0yd TV. Let's talk, and we're about to discuss this on the program. If it's the first time you're watching, please remember just to like, share, subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell and click on all so you're always updated with the latest report. We'll be right back after the break with the details to come. Welcome back and thanks for joining us for the program. This is Fl0yd TV. Let's talk. The name George Floyd will forever etch on the minds of many after he made international headlines right across the world after his life was taken uncalled for by a police officer who is now sentenced to a total of 22 and a half years for the taking out of this individual. Now, when we look on what has happened since then, it has been over a year and the trial had now produced a result, and the family are left to grapple with the reality that Mr. Floyd will not be around in order to see his kids grow and actually to become a grandfather based on this recent development. Now, with the situation that happened with Derek Chauvin, it has been a sad one, it has been an emotional one for the family and an emotional one for the friends and even the onlookers that were on site when this unfortunate situation occurred. It has been one of the most devastating moments for many, and this video will forever be played and played over again after this triggered a whole Black Lives Movement matters right across the world. But all I can say is that this situation could have been avoided, and we've seen over and over where police officers, not only in the United States, but in other countries as well, try to resort to brute force of executing their duties. And we have seen how that has landed a number of them into problems at times and even claiming the lives of innocent citizens. And in situations such as these situations could have been avoided. These situations could have been handled in a more professional manner. Now, when we backtrack a few months ago, and I would say a year ago, George Floyd would have been alive, living his life, not knowing that this would have been his last moment. What happened in the United States thereafter with the riots and all that, it just goes to show you that the people had enough and they actually stood out there in order to protest what they believe was an uncalled for crime being committed against the black race. And that triggers a whole entire protest right across many countries. And it's the first time we've ever seen people coming together in order to push for this case to go to court. And the police officers that were involved, they were actually removed off frontline duties, and most of them, if not all, were actually charged with an offense. Now, with that said, I'm about to provide you with the latest we have in relation to this case. I'll be also providing you with a clip of the actual court proceedings in which Mr. Derek Chauvin was sentenced yesterday. So let me update you with the latest that we have in relation to this matter. If you're not following the story, I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of what happened and who was George Floyd. If I can refresh your memory, that would be very good for you to just hang on to this story, and this just goes to show you that justice is served. And the family right now is actually breathing a sigh of relief after the court handed down this lengthy sentence for the man convicted of taking the life of Mr. George Floyd. So George Floyd was actually an American man murdered by a police officer during an arrest after a store clerk suspected that he used a counterfeit $20 bill in Minneapolis. Derek Chauvin, one of 4 police officers who arrived on the scene, knelt on George Floyd neck and back for 9 minutes and 29 seconds before his life was taken. George Floyd was born on October 14, 1973 and passed away on the 25th of May, 2020. Now, I'm about to provide you with the latest report that I have in relation to this court case and actually what transpired leading up to him being sentenced to 22.5 years, and that's Mr. Ge0rge Chauvin. So let me update you with that right now, right here on Links 007 TV. Let's talk. So Ge0rge Chauvin, the former police officer who killed George Floyd on a Minneapolis street last year, was sentenced on Friday to 22.5 years in prison. The police officer spoke briefly before the sentence was imposed, offering his condolences to George Floyd family. Under Minnesota law, Chauvin will have to serve 2/3 of the sentence, or 15 years, and will be eligible for supervised release for the remaining 7 years. The sentence exceeds the Minnesota sentencing guideline range of 10 years and 8 months to 15 years for the crime. Floyd's death sparked massive protests across nations over the police brutality, and it just goes to show you that this situation was one that was looked on and immensely monitored by many right across the world. Chauvin will remain in a restricted housing unit separated from general population at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in Oaks Park Heights for the time being. The police officer convicted of taking the life of George Floyd is actually now 45 years old, and he was convicted in April on charges of second-degree murder, unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter for his role in the death of Mr. George Floyd. Floyd's final moment of his life was actually captured by a 17-year-old on her cell phone, which illustrates in clear visual what Black Americans have long said about the criminal justice system and how it treats Black people. Floyd's death set off mass protests right across the globe, as well as incidents of looting and unrest. At the intersection of Ge0rge Avenue, 38th Street in Minneapolis, where George Floyd took his last breath, people watched the hearing on their mobile phones at this very spot. So what happened in this situation was that people gathered at the actual location where George Floyd's life was taken just in order to get a glimpse of the court proceedings on their mobile phone. Now the family is actually feeling much better based on this new development, but they will still have to grapple with the effect and a long-lasting effect that Mr. George Floyd's life was taken innocently and uncalled for in a situation that could have been dealt with differently. So the Minneapolis City Council paid George Floyd's family $27 million to settle a civil lawsuit over the killing in police custody. The settlement includes $500,000 for the neighborhood where Mr. George Floyd was arrested, the council stated. Mr. George Floyd's family filed federal civil rights lawsuit against the city last year, alongside ones against the officer Ge0rge Chauvin and 3 others that were fired and criminally charged over his death. So that's the latest we have in relation to this case right now. I'm about now to just bring you over to the court proceedings and what transpired leading up to the sentence of this police officer who was involved in the taking out of Mr. George Floyd. Let's go over to that right now on Links 007 TV.
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank everybody for being here and for providing the input you did. Not just the people who were in the courtroom here, but also those who provided written statements, both from the Fl0yd family and the defendant's family. I've read all the impact statements that were submitted earlier and listened carefully to all the input here today. And it is truly appreciated that you took the time to stay with this case and to provide me with input. I have reviewed the pre-sentence investigation and carefully considered all the facts of the case and the law, but my comments are actually going to be very brief because most of it's going to be in writing. I have a 22-page memorandum that is going to be attached to the sentencing order. And why am I doing it in writing? To emphasize the fact that determining the appropriate sentence in any case, and in this case, is a legal analysis. It's applying the rule of law to the facts of an individual and specific case. And that is why, as opposed to trying to being profound here on the record, I prefer that you read the legal analysis that explains how I determine the sentence in this case. What the case is, or what the sentence is not based on, is emotion or sympathy. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge the deep and tremendous pain that all the families are feeling, especially the Fl0yd family. You have our sympathies. And I acknowledge and hear the pain that you are feeling. I acknowledge the pain not only of those in this courtroom, but the Fl0yd family who are outside this courtroom and other members of the community. It has been painful throughout Hennepin County, throughout the state of Minnesota, and even the country. But most importantly, we need to recognize the pain of the Fl0yd family. I'm not going to attempt to be profound or clever, because it's not the appropriate time. I'm not basing my sentence also on public opinion. I'm not basing it on any attempt to send any messages. A trial court judge, the job of a trial court judge is to apply the law to specific facts and to deal with individual cases. And so, Mr. Chauvin, as to count 1, based on the verdict of the jury, finding you guilty of unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony under Minnesota Statute 609.19 subdivision 2 paren 1, it is the judgment of the court that you now stand convicted of that offense. Pursuant to Minnesota Statute section 609.04, counts 2 and 3 will remain unadjudicated as they are lesser offenses of count 1. As sentence for count 1, the court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Fl0yd. You are granted credit for 199 days already served. Pay the mandatory surcharge of $78 to be paid from prison wages. You're prohibited from possessing firearms, ammunition, or explosives for the remainder of your life. Provide a DNA sample as required by law. Register as a predatory offender as required by law. And then you will receive a copy of the order and also the attached memorandum explaining the court's analysis. Anything further from the state?
If this needs to be said, we just ask that it be executed forthwith.
Defendant is remanded to the custody of the sheriff to be transported back to the DOC or whichever custody is currently holding him. Anything from the defense? All right. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Well, there you have it. That was the actual sentencing of the man convicted of taking the life of Mr. George Fl0yd. Even though it's welcoming news for the family, I still think that this cannot mend that broken piece of their heart, as they will have this forever to deal with, and the situation and the emotion turmoil that they had to go through the entire proceeding. And this is actually over a year now that this situation occurred, but it's still edge and rest on the minds of many right across the world. So 22 and a half years, that is the set time that Mr. Chauvin is set to serve behind bars. However, he'll be eligible for parole after serving 15 years, and this would be a supervised sentence as well after he was convicted of the death of this black individual in the streets of the United States a year ago. This is where we're going to leave this one here for now. Thanks for watching. This has been Links 007 TV. Let's talk. You can just drop it in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about this story, and how do you think that the court handled the situation. Do you think that they handed down the sentence properly, or do you believe that the situation could have been dealt with differently? I look forward to hear your responses in the comment section. Peace out, bless, and much respect goes out to you, the viewers, for always watching. Much love and thanks.